Everything is personal right here. Everything is personal right here.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of Everything is Personal. And today we have our special guest, Rajiv Nathan. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, and I'm pretty jealous of your record collection there.
Oh, that's only a small. I have hundreds and hundreds. So I used to be way back in the day. For those of you that can remember record stores, I used to be a music buyer for Tower Records. So I collected a lot of vinyl. I still collect. That's one of my favorite things to do. Is maybe consume a little bit of cannabis, go to a record store, and go digging in the crates. Man, I love doing that shit.
Well, I know this is your show, but can I actually ask you a question about the records? So I'm going to guess, I could be wrong, I'm going to guess it's not an accident you've chosen those specific records to feature as your background. So I'm curious why Amy Winehouse and why I think that song's in the Key of Life.
Yeah, there's more. There's I think I have Paul's Boutique there. I have Guns N' Roses Appetite. Yep. I have Songs in the Key of Life. I have Metallica Master of Puppets. Down there, I have Zeppelin. I have some Ozzy here. That's Jar of Flies, Alice in Chains. It's a double album, so it has Sap on the other side as well.
All right.
And then Amy Winehouse and, like I said, Beastie Boys, Paul's Boutique. So why I chose these? So I kind of switch these around sometimes. And it's sort of what I'm in the mood for, what I'm feeling in the moment. Like Songs in the Key of Life has been there for a long time because it's one of my favorite albums of all time. Even though it may not be my favorite Stevie Wonder album, I really like Inner Visions, but this is always like a classic go-to. Mm-hmm. And Master of Puppets, Metallica. So I've been really listening to a lot of Alice in Chains lately. So I love the more sort of melancholy, sort of music that makes you sad in a way. And I watched the Amy Winehouse movie, and I don't know. There's something about sad music that connects with me. So you have sort of a dichotomy of Metallica and Sap there. So that's why I chose those.
All right, very nice, very nice. I like a man who knows his musical tastes and gets into music.
Man, I have my musical taste. We'll get into music in a little bit. I ask all my guests like music questions towards the end. But, the musical taste thing varies so much. I can sit there and listen to jazz, and that's what I'm into. And right now I'm in the mood for, playing some Coltrane or Dexter Gordon. And then I can listen to heavy, like really heavy metal. I can listen to hip hop, and I can listen to Michael Kiwanuka. I don't know if you know who that is, like really mellow, kind of cool, soulful stuff. So it varies whatever I'm in the mood for. But I wanted to ask you first, I wanted to ask, where did you grow up?
I live in Chicago, Illinois, and I grew up about 25-30 minutes outside of the city in a suburb called Wheaton, Illinois. It's like directly west. I think it's probably 25 miles. So maybe more like 45 minutes, but like 25 miles west.
Yeah, I'm in LA. It's the same thing. So everything it's either 20 minutes or an hour and 20 minutes. You never know.
Yeah. It's traffic dependent. Yeah,
exactly. So I wanted to find out like your family dynamic. So were your parents together? You have siblings?
Yes. So my parents were together, still are together. I have one older brother who's 3 years older. Both my parents are immigrants. So they came from India. My dad came over, I think, in 79, I believe. And my mom, shortly after that, they were married. He was here getting his master's.
Yeah.
And then I think as soon as she was able to move here as well. But they lived in a combination of Chicago suburbs. And then also they had I think as I recall, they had like a 5-month stint in Cleveland, hated it and moved back.
Yeah, well, so I'm an immigrant too. I was born in Lithuania, and we came over in '79 as well. with my parents and my mom's parents. So I find it fascinating, the immigrant story. There is something to be said. And it doesn't matter where you're from. It's this not taking America for granted and what it gives you. And there's a certain sense when I talk to people that are either children of immigrants, if it was communicated to them in that way, or immigrants themselves, there's a certain drive that I think is a big differentiator from people that are, are from here for generations and people that are either children of immigrants or immigrants. Do you feel that that's something that was instilled in you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like even though I'm a first generation, I feel like if you've ever seen the Hamilton musical, one of the lines I resonated with was when they say, "Immigrants, we get the job done." I think one of the things that was probably, I think is probably the most like resounding sentiment I have from my father growing up is like the value of hard work and the value of education. And, at the time, I don't think I really understood it. And I was definitely like rejecting a lot of it. But as an adult, I really appreciate some of those lessons. I was my brother and I, like, we would, let's say, have homework that was due in a week. Now, most students, what are you going to do? You're going to wait until the night before and you're going to do the homework that's due in a week.
For sure.
And my dad would be really like hot on us to not do that. And not just homework. Let's say like there was an exam in 3 weeks. What are most students going to do? They're going to study the night before. And my dad would get on us about like, you got to study like today. Is it in 3 weeks? Is it in 3 months? I want you spending time studying in advance. There was always this focus on, quote unquote studies as was the word.
Yeah.
And it was really frustrating because, and especially on weekends too, he wanted us to spend time, not just doing our homework, but like additionally studying beyond what the homework assigned was. And I think, it was challenging because when you're preteen, teenager, and your friends are calling you to hang out at like 1:00 on a Saturday afternoon, and all you want to do is that, but then you're told, no, you can't go out. You got to stay in and study. You're like, what the hell? This is so unfair. And so living it in the moment was really tough, and I really didn't grasp it. And then I remember when I was in college, it was freshman year of college, so now you don't have the oversight of your parents the way you do before, when you're living under their roof. And I had some paper due on like Tuesday, and it was like a beast of a paper. And it was probably like a 15 or 20 page paper that was due. And it was Saturday. Some friends of mine were having a party like during the day as well. And I really wanted to go, but I made this, like, I didn't like tell anyone necessarily, but I made a personal decision. And I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'll go to that later, but I'm going to spend the next few hours knocking out several pages of this paper. So I'm not doing all of it on Monday night. And when I made that decision, I literally, I remember being in the moment being like, wait a second. No one is telling me I need to stay back and doing this, but I am doing it out of choice. So that discipline that was instilled in before must have worked.
Yeah, I mean,
and I think that's kind of how I've been like approaching everything since then in some way or another is I think to achieve what you want to achieve, you got to have a sense of discipline.
Yeah, I think there's a sense of conditioning too, right? So if you've been conditioned to do so, even though you didn't want to, now there's a part of that in you. And then you sort of, so, when my daughter, she goes to Berkeley, Cal Berkeley. And then one of the things she's always a like last second studier and all that stuff. And then the hard work thing, and maybe it's on me about hard work because I don't know anything else. Like, I don't know a replacement for hard work. I saw my parents do it as immigrants. I don't know what else to do. But she keeps telling me, no, Dad, there's people who make a shitload of money and they don't work that hard. they do a few posts and they become influencers from that and all that stuff. And I'm like, great, but do you know maybe they had 8,000 posts before that one? Maybe there was a lot of hard work. What you see is only 1%. I just had somebody that had wrote, I'm an overnight. It took me 35 years to become an overnight success. So you work for 35 years to get that in. And there is a certain mentality, especially, and I don't want to be like the kids these days, that kind of thing. But there is something to be said for this shortcuts. We can do, we have ChatGPT, we have everything. We have shortcuts in life. I still think there's a way to utilize shortcuts, but also, combine that with hard work and then get to your purpose. And I wanted to ask you this question about, as you're a kid, like what kind of kid were you into sports? Were you into math, science? Like what kind of kid, what were your interests?
Yeah. Huge into sports as a kid. I think maybe in first grade, I thought I was going to make it to the NBA. And I probably carried that dream until like third or fourth grade. So played basketball, played baseball, recreationally in the backyard and stuff, played football. So I was full on obsessed. I think the first paper I ever remember writing in second grade, I was about me wanting to create a basketball league, I think. So that definitely was a big part of my upbringing. And then even playing all the sports video games too was definitely a huge part of my upbringing. And this actually came up the other day. It's so random that this is a skill I have today, but I'm humbly, I can say I am pretty good at knowing how to pronounce Central and Eastern European names. And that's because growing up watching the NBA during the influx of the Arvydas Sabonis.
I'm Lithuanian, by the way.
Yeah, right?
It's okay that you brought that up.
Yeah, right. The Peja Stojakovic and these players, right? Through watching the NBA, I by proxy got exposed to all these European names, and then as an adult, it's made it a lot easier for me to know how to pronounce them. And I bring that up to say it's actually helped me create better footing with people right off the bat or earlier on in a relationship in various settings. So some examples of how that's come out is one of my professions is teaching yoga. And if I have a student with a particular last name and I haven't met them before and I'm doing attendance for class, I'll call out that name and they'll be like, oh yeah, you got that right. Most people don't usually get that right on the first try. Another example, another one of my professions is doing ring announcing for MMA.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of, sometimes at these events, you'll get people who have a particular Polish last name or Lithuanian or whatever it might be. And I'll, before the show starts and I'm going around the locker room asking for name pronunciations, I'm able to be like, hey, is it Kurgovich? Something like that. And they'll be like, yeah, you got it. And, then I don't have to worry about while I'm doing the thing, am I pronouncing their name right or not? I just kind of know that I am because I had this exposure so long ago.
So when your athletic dreams became more recreational than professional in a way that you were mentioning, was there what did you want to do? And the reason why I asked this, because I know as a child of immigrants. I'm an immigrant myself, but I came when I was 6 years old. So I'll sort of say, as a child of immigrants who, went to school and got a profession. My dad was an engineer. My mom did accounting, and being an entrepreneur or somebody who's artistic didn't align with their choices for me.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, what did you want to do, and then what were you kind of pushed or suggested into doing?
Yeah, I think so. I think I wanted to get into marketing, but I think specifically I wanted to get into sports marketing. But that idea, and I thought especially when I was younger, I thought marketing was advertising and creating commercials, creating posters, things like that. So that's what I wanted to get into. And I was definitely creatively inclined from a younger age. I just don't know if my parents knew how to like cultivate that, because they neither of them would classify themselves as particularly like creative people. My dad's a chemical engineer, which I think is creativity in its own respect, but it's not like it's not like a classically creative, profession. My mom is, or I mean, they're both retired now, so I'm saying is, but I guess technically was. My mom was a nuclear medicine technologist. So that's, doing like bone scans in the radiology department at hospitals. So, another science-based profession. So, and my older brother ultimately grew up to become a physician. So, I'm like the black swan of the group. But early on, I had this like creative inclination. I would, even like as a kid, I was like creating jingles for things, or even doing like small little entrepreneurial, I don't know if you want to call them ventures, but just like executions. Like I remember in third grade creating video game guides and trying to sell them to other students. But honestly, all I did was buy a guide from the store, cut out some pages, and then glue them to like construction paper and staple it all together. The venture didn't last beyond selling one copy, because I realized I can't replicate it after I've cut out all the pages one time. But those are the kinds of things that I was into, and just like, I don't know, leaning into like doing things a little bit differently as well. And, it's not that my parents dissuaded me whatsoever. Again, I just don't know if they truly understood how to like cultivate or incubate it. They didn't necessarily say you need to go into a certain profession. I think they were, it's kind of like the joke, the classic like Indian parent mindset is like doctor, engineer, lawyer. I think there was a little bit of like leaning towards that desire, more so because those are just seen as like very stable professions. And what do most immigrant families want is they want stability, right? They don't want anyone to not. I'm not going to say like my parents were not the ones who came here with like $1 in their suitcase. Like my dad came for a master's, was on a scholarship. Now he grew up from very meager means, but ultimately through education got himself, like well funded, if you will, to be able to go to school. But he didn't want my brother or I to have to like necessarily suffer any quote unquote hardship. And you think of those other careers as very stable. You think of being employed as very stable. It's why you don't necessarily think about entrepreneurship, because it seems too quote unquote risky. But the two things that I think really were the lessons that came out of my childhood were, it wasn't that either of my parents said you have to go down one path. They were just very keen on like, whatever you choose, really commit yourself to it. Don't do it half-assedly. Like if you're going to do something, really dedicate yourself to it, and like, become a master of your craft. Like there's no room for people who just want to skate by, was kind of the idea, combined with this other lesson that, especially when we were being like disciplined because we had like messed up or something. This was the thing that would be said a lot was, I never want you to say the best years of my life were when my parents were providing for me. And that, in many different subconscious ways, I think that's what's like, those things have has propelled me over the years. And it's a pretty profound statement, right? And especially when I think of, coming back to me saying before how like, in that age, all you want to do is like hang out with your friends. Like, oh, they're out. Why can't I be out? And then, I don't want to paint like so broad of a brush, but I could look at certain people and be like, today they're probably saying, oh man, life was so much better back in high school. And I didn't, I did cool things in high school, right? Ended up being a track athlete. I ended up being, an all-state athlete. I ended up running for a year in college, but I am happy to say that was a great chapter in my life, but not like, I don't like yearn for those days to come back kind of thing. I didn't peak, at 18.
Yeah, I really think also what I'm hearing, and it resonates with me too, when people come to this country, they have sort of this scarcity mindset. They don't want to be broke. They always want to have stability. My parents had an intervention for me that they didn't realize that I was I wanted to go into music. Like Rick Rubin was that was my hero.
You got some Rick Rubin vibes.
Yeah, I'm like, I want to do that, but I don't know what it is because he doesn't know music. I know it's a producer, but I didn't even know what it was. And they actually had an intervention for me that made me go to physical therapy school. So
Wow.
yeah, it's great. I'm glad I did what I did, and the same thing with you. I'm grateful for the time now. So all those experiences in the past got me here, but there's a difference between having an abundance mindset, and I think entrepreneurs are less risk averse, and they have this abundance mindset that I'm okay, I'm resilient, I can make it. But people that have gone through these hardships, they sort of they want to be within their box because it feels secure for them. They feel a sense of certainty in that box. And when you're uncertain, because I'm uncomfortable, and when you're uncomfortable, now you're stressing and all these other things. So they don't want, like, I wouldn't want that for my daughter, even though she's an actress and she's a media and film a major and all this stuff. So I'm like, oh man, I hear my parents' voice in my head. I'm like, no, I have to I have to allow her to fly and do whatever she wants to do, fail, learn, and that's how we sort of grow. And there's a question in this that I'm coming up because you've in the startup mode, storytelling is one of the things that you emphasize the most. So in your journey, as you're progressing through all these things, and and marketing, as you mentioned, how did you decide or figure out for yourself that the way to connect with people is through storytelling?
So one of the other things that I grew up, I didn't mention this before, but my first and true love is professional wrestling. And
I used to
still my love to this day.
I didn't mean to interrupt what you were saying, but man, when I was a kid, I'm an only child. I spent a lot of time in my room. And I remember when I was 13 years old, I got a TV, and I'm probably older than a lot of the people who are listening and you. So it's, you have to get up and change the channel.
The dial. Yeah, I remember that. We had one of
the
those.
antenna.
Yeah.
But wrestling was my thing. And I collected wrestling magazines and all that stuff all the way. I remember Iron Sheik, Bob Backlund. Like, that was my era before Hogan joined. So anyway, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm a lot.
Yeah. So, I was like the generation after, like, the 90s generation, but I've seen all the old footage. So all that stuff I'm familiar with. But, pro wrestling was like my first real exposure that I remember anyway to like storytelling. And, I like picked up, even as a kid, I picked up relatively quickly that I'm watching a show and it's not, quote unquote, like real. But I loved that about it. And I loved that more than ever watching a boxing match, because to me, if you're watching something like boxing, there's no context. It's just, it's competition, which for some people that's enough. But I loved the idea of this concept of like, it is a drama that is unfolding and you have a reason to be watching for this reason, for this good guy, for this bad guy, that kind of thing. So, fast forward, and with always having that, kind of as part of me, my first foray into entrepreneurship, sort of like in a formal sense, was actually, it was, at the time, I wouldn't be able to tell you this, but now looking back, I could say it was the predecessor to what I do today with Startup Hype Man. But it was a business called Idea Lemon. And my co-founder and I, for that, focused that on helping individuals develop their personal brand, more through like a personal development lens. And our market, that we landed on for that was people like in the career market. So people changing jobs, they needed to interview, they needed to represent themselves a certain way. And it was interesting, growing up watching Stone Cold Steve Austin be like brash and arrogant on the microphone. Why, if Stone Cold Steve Austin can do it there, why can't Steve from accounting do it over here in the way that's going to make sense for Steve for accounting? So that's where I think I really started to see like there is a need for story like at all times. and it's happening everywhere. And the way we consume entertainment is story, but we don't seem to bring it enough to the table in our everyday lives, and certainly not enough in our professional lives.
Yeah, it's funny because this is the second time I'm going to mention Rick Rubin in a podcast, which I don't think I did in a long time. But that's what he said. He was influenced by professional wrestling and came up with the characters and did all the thing with the Beastie Boys because he learned in professional wrestling. So when you
Speaking of Rick Rubin,
yeah,
I'm sure you must have this book.
I do. I have, and I listened to the audio version as well. Yeah, it's amazing, and we can talk about music and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so, I guess when you started startup Hype Man, was there an influence of music? Like, was music going to be part of this, or were there two separate things that you sort of tried to figure out how to combine in
Yeah.
and bring them both into fruition?
A good question. So for a while, I was trying to make music as part of my professional brand in some way. So if you go back to the Idea Lemon stuff, which was the business before, there were a couple like small forays into it. Like, for example, when we would do these live workshops, I would like bust out into like a rap to explain a personal branding topic. But the desire was always there. It's just like the level of comfort with really putting it out there took some time. So like I could do, for example, live workshop. There's 30 people in the room. No one's filming it, right? It lives and dies in that moment in that room. I don't know if I was so much at the point of putting it online yet or putting it out for the masses. And that's even to say, in 2014, I put out a mixtape, but it was independent of what I was doing with my business at that time. So as I began Startup Hype Man, I think I just started to get a little bit more comfortable. And to me, it started to seem more natural to be like, let's pull from this world over here of entertainment and music to influence this world of business over here. So very early on, actually, if you look at, if you go into like the archives of some of the early versions of my website and the messaging and things like that, you'll see, like, I think the first tagline I had was make your pitch a performance. And there's like a microphone dangling off of like the little word mark. So that stuff was definitely there early on. And then I got an opportunity. I saw there was this competition being held by one of the Chicago newspapers called the Big Idea Awards. It was just kind of like an open call for like, we're looking for people like with creative ideas, et cetera, et cetera. And I happened to be walking out of an incubator in Chicago, and I saw the newspaper just sitting on like one of the coffee tables, and that thing was featured in it. And then I look at it and I'm like, the application deadline is tonight. So I went and I rented out a practice studio, and I quickly like just wrote and recorded 2 songs. And then I submitted those as my things for this contest. But my pitch for that contest was creating a album of hip hop for entrepreneurs, almost like schoolhouse rock for startups, teaching entrepreneurial lessons via hip hop. And I ended up making it into the finals. There was like 8 or 9 or 10 finalists. So I made the finals. I didn't win the whole thing ultimately. I think the one that won was like this very good, very well designed, like mobile ice cream cart, which like in the event they're giving out samples of ice cream. It's kind of hard to beat free ice cream. But that was like I was like, okay, there's something here. And then I kind of tabled it for a while. And it's good that I did. I was still thinking of music in the background, but I wasn't necessarily like I wasn't making music actively very often. And I wasn't working on this schoolhouse rock for startups idea as an active project either. And I say it's a good thing I didn't, because in 2023, I released my first, let's call it like startup focused album. It's called Goat to Market, and it's on all the channels, Spotify, etc. And that is an album that is startup hip hop. It's hip hop for founders, but it's not teaching things. It is telling the stories of the life. In the same way, you know, Biggie raps about slinging crack on the corners. I'm rapping about how you're trying to sling your product to your first, 10 users. And had I tried to make that album 3-4 years prior, it wouldn't have worked for a few reasons. One is that Schoolhouse Rock idea is like, it's cute, but it's very gimmicky. And it doesn't have much replayability as well. And the audience is so niche for it. It's like, you got to find people who are founders who like hip hop, who also want to be educated while listening to music.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a very niche person and a very niche use case.
Yeah.
And the other reason I don't think it would have worked any earlier is because I didn't have enough experience in the game to really be able to create the lyrics that tell the stories that need to be told. By the time I was working on this album, I was like, I want to say maybe 7 years into entrepreneurship overall and 5 years into my company. And I had spent, I'm spending every day working side by side with an entrepreneur. So I now have my own collection of experience, plus I'm gleaning all of their experience from the conversations we've had. And that's what's allowed these lyrics that I have in all my music now to be so meaningful to this group, and enough maturity in myself to create music that, I think if I did it any earlier, I would have thought of it as only a piece of marketing. And therefore I'd have to be like, oh, well, if I'm talking about product market fit, I can only say these kinds of things. Whereas these songs I've put together on this album, am I talking about things like that? Sure. But am I binding myself to only these lyrics because it's this thing? No. And what I like is if you're in that game, you're going to listen and you're going to really enjoy it because it's going to be meaningful to you. If you've never thought about entrepreneurship in your life, you're still going to listen and like nod your head and be like, this sounds pretty good. And that's the difference.
Yeah, no, I concur because, and you brought Biggie. Like, so if Biggie doesn't have the experience, he hasn't sold enough crack in the corner. Now he's telling somebody else's story, and being able to relate to that is not going to be authentic. And
Right.
I think KRS-One talks about that stuff too, like the difference between a rapper and an MC, because you're actually taking experiences that occurred that you're aware of, and you're regurgitating them. We're using hip hop.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that there's a lot of rappers, and I'm not going to mention people's names, that tell a story where they're now living this story, and it seems inauthentic. The beats are great. Maybe the way they present the information is good. It's lyrical. I can kind of connect to that, but the story doesn't feel real. You don't have that emotional. So I completely agree with you. Have lived through that and gone through that makes it much more authentic. And when you're an authentic storyteller, and I'm making a statement, but it's going to be more of a question. When you're an authentic storyteller, you're connecting better, because I've done a bunch of pitches as well. And when you're not connecting to what you're pitching, it comes off. Yeah, some people will be interested, but it comes off inauthentic. You're missing that passion for it because you didn't walk in those shoes. And so is part of having a hype-worthy startup pitch having that connection and passion for what it is that you're conveying?
So let me make sure I understand the question. Is you're saying on the side of a founder is part of having success with delivering a pitch, having passion for the product or what you're building?
Yeah, having a connection for what it is that you're trying to convey. Like everybody has, why am I doing this kind of thing? Well, a lot of, people want to make money, people want to make a change, but I really feel that when somebody has a purpose that's bigger than, I'm going to try to make a new coffee cup because I don't want people to hold something that's that high. You don't need a couple.
Sure.
But I'm going to do this because I'm going to give coffee out to a million people that can't get it. Something that is a lot more connected to a purpose and passion. Does that make it a more hype word? Because you heard a lot of pitches in your life and you've helped a lot of companies do that. I'm trying to think about mistakes that people make and what actually works. Is there a commonality in the formulation that works for people? And as part of that, connecting to that purpose is greater than yourself.
Yeah. Okay. So yes. The sentence, I'm only doing this because I'm getting paid to do it, has a shelf life. And there's only so far you can take whatever you're doing because you're getting paid to do it. Versus, I'm doing this because it's my life. I love it. I can't think about anything else. Like, that is going to take you so much further. And if you are an entrepreneur, chances are, you took a bet on yourself, and that means something. And that is, in many cases, if it's not necessary, it is incredibly helpful to being able to, deliver a pitch that ultimately is going to be that you can stand behind. One of the things that we sort of figure out in the process when we're working with companies is, what is the common thread across this person's entire life that helps indicate that this company they're building today is not just like another thing they're doing because it's convenient. It's actually an extension of how their brain works. So if I think back to several years ago, this founder, his name is Scott DeGrossier. He's the founder of Wicked Reports, which, functionally the product is, it takes all of a online business or e-commerce business's ad spend in every category. And it is able to crunch all that data and tell you exactly how long each funnel is taking a person to buy, and when you need to, add something else into their sequence to get them to reignite it with interest, and ultimately optimizing, the ad spend as a result of this. So all of that is built around data. When we worked with Scott, we found his entire world revolves around data, going back to when he was 13 years old and his grandfather took him to the horse racing track. And, any 13-year-old is going to go and just be like, wow, horses, this is fun. He went and takes out a notebook and starts drawing out, he looks at the odds on the board and starts drawing out predictive models. And his grandfather ends up having to pull him away because he's won money based off of these models he drew. And at 13 years old, you can't be gambling. Right. So and then that led to when he worked at, he managed however many terabytes of data at apartments.com. And then at Motorola, he was the head of data and all these things. Right. And all of this is to say that Wicked Reports today is not made out of convenience. It is Scott DeGrossier's mind at work, because it's the only way his mind works is thinking about, how do you take data and make it more accessible and usable?
I can't emphasize that more. It's so important to understand that's why I always ask people about their childhood, about what they wanted to do, because if you start looking at parallels, if you follow those things that are inherent in you, and we all have a little bit of a different thing that sort of motivates us. If you follow that thread across what you're doing now, and you're connected to that, most people don't tell these stories. A perfect example, I have a genetics company. We do genetic testing analysis. Why? Well, personalized health and wellness is really important to me. But why? We started with the endocannabinoid system, and this question of why always comes up. And if I'm like, we feel like people, when I was doing it, when I first started, I was like, well, everybody should have a personalized experience. People should avoid adverse effects. But if I go back in my history of answering that question, why, and this is a wonderful thing that you brought up, because I really think that people need to understand that comes deep inside. If you can make that connection. My grandfather had a stroke when I was really, really young, and he proceeded to have several strokes. But I remember my mom and my grandmother would sit with bags of of pills.
Mhm.
And they would call the doctors and these interactions and like, let's get him off this one, let's get him on that one. Another stroke. Oh, it's an adverse effect of that. So I'm like, well, why can't they figure it out? Why are they experimenting on him? And I had this aversion to prescription medication since I was a kid because I think I was scared of it. I was scared of
Yeah.
that type of doctoring. So as I proceed, it didn't do when I was at Price Waterhouse or PwC, nothing to do with my story. It never aligned with my story, my why. But as I go through my iterations, that's where it is. And if I can do a freestyle about it, I think then that way it'll make it even a better story, right?
Yeah. Oh, totally. And it's like, these are the things that we see coming back to entertainment, right? We see these examples in entertainment, and like you latch onto a character because you understand what they're about. I don't know if you've watched the show Suits.
I've seen a little bit of it, yeah.
Right. So, one of the two main characters, Mike, you find out early on that when he was 8 years old, his parents were killed in a car crash by a drunk driver. And throughout all 7 or whatever seasons of that show, that story keeps coming up for him in guiding his decision making and his actions. So, because he's so motivated to make sure that, in various ways, he's kind of always thinking about how do I not let the next 8-year-old be left an orphan, right? And that's like his moral compass, that comes out of that. And so I think we all, whether it's something as extreme as that, or whether, you're seeing your grandfather dying or not dying of a stroke, but having a stroke and having to go through all the medications.
He did
and
eventually.
Like okay.
It was seven later, but yeah.
Whether it's things like that, or whether it's something like Scott's case, where he just naturally was gravitating towards everything that had to do with like number crunching, right? We all have these things that in some form or fashion develop our compass for decision making. And I think it's a lot of times we don't give our own background enough credit, particularly when we start playing the comparison game against others. I talked to a decent number of people who become our clients. Will kind of confidentially tell me like, I don't know, like, am I even worth anything? I don't have a Harvard MBA, that kind of talk. And I think that's that talk we need to wipe out of our heads, because, you can have a great pitch for other people, but the most important story is the one that's happening between your two ears. And it's the story you're telling yourself about yourself. And what we need to recognize is that everyone's background is valid and it's all worth something. We just don't often think deeply enough about what we've actually been through, good or bad, and what credibility that gives us, and what kind of knowledge base that truly gives us.
So what is that why for you? Like, what is that thread from, being young and being that, black swan, as you refer to yourself? What is that driver for you that connects you to your own story where you can then help others?
I am deeply driven by a belief that the world needs more expression and everyone deserves to express themselves. And that is really what fuels all the professional things that I do, but also like, the personal causes that I care about and either put attention or time or money behind. I really think I was put on this earth to make it a more expressive place. And I'm doing that through both helping others express themselves in the ways I can, I'll use work in air quotes because work can mean many different things. But it's a combination of what can I do for others, but also myself. Can I be the most authentically expressive person myself to then, in a way, tangentially influence how other people may see what's possible for them?
So if you had the option, like, you hip hop recording artist, next, I don't know, Drake, whatever, whoever else, or you have a successful company that helps other people succeed, and you're, helping them craft their story, would you choose one over the other?
Why not both?
That's what you should be saying. Exactly.
I'll put it this way. One of the things that I regret from growing up is that I never did theater. I think it would have. Now, I don't know if it would have been possible because I was really into track and I got pretty good at that. So the schedules probably would have conflicted. But I think had I done theater, I would have pursued the creative arts a little bit more like seriously early on. Where I'm at now is, like I built enough of my what's called professional stock in like this tech world, and I'm good with that, right? Like the network I've built is not for nothing. So the way I'm approaching it is, how can I shake this world with this talent that I have versus try and, get pennies on the stream to try and, and hand out my mixtape at every open mic, that kind of thing. Part of this too, it's like, I think a good thing for people to think about is it's not just a matter of like the interest or the passion, if you will. It's everything also has a game that needs to be played in order for that thing to be successful. And when I look at where I'm at, like I didn't really start taking the music stuff seriously until I got into my mid 30s, let's say. I am not willing to play the game of starting from scratch as a musician, but I am willing to keep playing the game of building a company and using that as a leverage point to create more music. And, I think, in the B2B world, I can have a pretty significant influence and create my own moments there. Like I'm very appreciative of the fact that I've been able to perform at tech conferences and events because that's something people in that realm haven't seen before. So if I can keep bringing that, let's call it outside energy into that realm, I think that's great, and I want to keep doing that.
Yeah, I had the privilege of participating in one of your seminars, events, and you truly are a high energy person when you're engaging in this. Hype man is there is a definition for it, and you're definitely it because you bring this energy that I think is infectious. I really enjoy. It makes people who are uncomfortable get out of their shell a little bit. For me, I'm pretty comfortable doing it anyway because I speak on stages. But I could tell some people, even in the breakouts, some people are very uncomfortable, and you do a really good job. But as an athlete, as a presenter on stage, your adrenaline's going. You're there. How do you unwind from that, and how do you recharge yourself so you can keep doing it over and over?
So before I do a performance or a big talk of some kind, let's say it's like a keynote speech at an event or conference, or I'm performing live music, I have this little like pre-show ritual, which really just involves like somehow along the way, coconut water became my like go-to drink for any of this stuff. And I feel like Vita Coco owes me a sponsorship or something like that for how many pictures they've been in, incidentally. But I will grab my whatever it is, my liter thing of coconut water. I'll go find a corner of the room. I'll just kind of crouch down. I'll close my eyes. I'll slow down my breathing, and I will kind of repeat this like, almost like this mantra to myself of like, create expression, help others feel possibility, create expression, help others feel possibility. And that helps really just center myself before I'm going to go do the thing. I have to imagine that also helps me afterwards as well. I don't have proof on that, but I'm just, I'm taking an educated guess here. But what's interesting is I use up so much adrenaline when I'm on stage in whatever capacity it is that, and I can carry that through for as long as is required. So if my commitment is just show up on stage and then disappear, that's fine. But if my commitment is show up on stage and then also be at the after party and talk to people, etc., my adrenaline will carry through for that. Once my quote unquote commitment is done, I am like, oh, like
Exactly.
the energy just kind of zaps out of me. Like all of my adrenaline is gone. And I'm almost like, I don't want to or need to talk to anyone at that point. And I just kind of like, I chill, right? Like I'll probably start like watching TV, maybe eat like some Taco Bell or something like that. But that, that's how I approach it. It's not necessarily like I have a formal unwind.
Yeah.
It's just that I know I'm going to hit a point in that day or that night when my mental commitment is done and all that energy is going to suck out of me. And I'm okay with that. The first couple of times, I think it was very new to me. I was like, wait, what's happening? And then I realized like, no, I've used up all the adrenaline I have and I need a break. And so just, I think allowing myself that break, that time to just like watch some trash TV, whatever it is, zone out, not have to think about anything and, enjoy myself. That can be okay.
Yeah. I don't think people realize what it takes neurochemically to be able to perform. When you're up on stage. Yeah, and you can connect to it naturally, but still, you have so many neurochemicals, dopamine, adrenaline, you have cortisol, you have all these things that are running through your bloodstream. And then when you're done, there's a reuptake. So you feel depleted and you need that reset. So it absolutely makes
depleted that's a really good word for it. Yeah, you feel depleted.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I have some music related questions for you as well. Do you remember, and if so, the very first concert that you attended?
Yes. I did not get to go to a concert until high school, I think. And there's a radio station in Chicagoland that it might be national. It's called B96. It's like a hip hop R&B pop station. And every year they had something called like Summer Fest or Summer Jam or something like that. And so I think it was my freshman or sophomore year of high school. One of my friends happened to get free tickets to Summer Jam and like backstage passes as well. And so that was the first concert I had ever been to. The headliner was D12, which was Eminem's rap group, but without Eminem.
Right.
Which was actually funny because at that time they had come out with the song Band, which is a parody song about how Eminem's band, like he's more important than everyone in his band, so he doesn't need to like do the things that they do. Like they carry his bags. He's the lead man. And then in concert, he actually isn't actually with them, which I, so funny that happened. If we don't count that, cause that was like, whatever landed on free tickets, I would say, I think it was the following year where I like purchased tickets cause I really wanted to go, was a Kanye West show during the tour for his second album. And what's wild is to think like, he's like this global superstar now. And at that time, he performed in DeKalb, Illinois, which is like a rural town, but it has Northern Illinois University in it. And he performed in the what do you call it? Like the pavilion, like the Northern Illinois pavilion. And it didn't even sell out. Mm. And I saw him at that point, and it's wild to think he was there versus where he is today, which, anyone on earth perhaps could recognize him.
Yeah, for sure. Or at least wearing his mask.
Yeah.
Which is the last concert I saw him doing.
But there's even a lesson there, right? Like even Kanye had a point where he wasn't doing sellout shows.
True. You just got to keep pushing through. What was the last concert you attended?
Most recently was a couple months ago, sort of this, I don't know how to describe them, but the group is called Beats Antique.
Yeah, I know them really well.
You familiar with them? Yeah, amazing. And it's like a visual performance in addition to just the music. And that was my second time seeing them.
I would say, it's sort of Middle Eastern influenced kind of beats with some lo-fi, like old school I don't even know.
I think I would say it's
Housey,
like
kind of.
it's like bass forward world music. Maybe that's the best way to think
That's
of
a better
it.
description. I agree. But I love the performance art of it too. It's amazing.
Yeah. And one of, I'll tell you, like one of the things, just on the note of music, like, my wife and I, like one of our like quote unquote things is live entertainment. So like if there's a concert that either of us is interested in going, one of us will just like get the tickets, assuming we're going to go. And if the other person can't, it's like, oh, I'll just go with a friend then. But like, it's almost like we don't need to like discuss, are we going to go to this or not? Just someone will get the tickets, assuming like, hey, this, because we like live music.
Yeah, we do the same thing with my girlfriend. I go to at least one show a week. Usually it's a couple.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I see a lot of LA. I'm lucky. I see, the show at the Troubadours, the show at the Roxy. It doesn't have to be big shows, but
Sure.
some amazing shows. All right, so another music question. For next year, you can only listen to 5 albums. You don't have to remember the name of the album. It could be like an Eminem album or whatever it is. What will be those 5 albums?
Wow. J. Cole's most recent album that just came out, Friday Night Lights. An Eminem album. I can't say which one. I don't know exactly which one, but one of the Eminem albums. I'll pick probably Jay-Z's Black album. And then I'd probably go with something like a Nas, like maybe like Illmatic. I'd say Illmatic or Biggie Ready to Die. And then the 5th one would be, I got to switch up the genre. So probably a Bonobo album.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw Bonobo at and the Summit event. I don't know if you ever heard of Summit. It's a
no, I haven't. But Bonobo's fantastic live.
Oh, yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I didn't just something came to mind because J. Cole, I think, was the only contemporary hip hop guy that you just mentioned. I was wondering. I usually don't have these hip hop conversations, even though I had like Be Real on. I was on Exhibit's show, but
nice.
I'm curious what you think of today's sort of hip hop. And I don't want to be that old guy like, oh, back in the day, because my daughter.
I try very hard not to be that guy. Like it's tough.
I know. I allow her. I'm like, I want to know what's going on today. So she's always playing me new stuff, and I'm like, it just sounds the same. It's repetitive. And
yeah.
Is it just me, the old, 50 plus white guy who's like, I grew up with, old school hip hop, who's now like, oh, like these guys, it's mumble rap kind of thing. But I wanted to get your, professional opinion on what your thoughts are.
Again, and I try very hard to not be like the get off my lawn type when it comes to music. But so in that respect, the way I try and approach it is I personally value lyricism over everything else. So a lot of the music today, let's call it mumble rap and like trap, does not carry that same value. And it's not for me. And if it's for you, great. Not everyone needs music to serve the same purpose in their life. And that's okay. And so I'm not here to trash it. I'm just here to say it doesn't vibe with me.
Do you think the lyricism, like I know Kendrick, I guess he's a contemporary rapper, like outside of Kendrick and maybe J. Cole and a couple other guys, do you think that lyricism is more of a old school kind of rap connection that we have rather than the kids these days? Because I asked her, I'm like, can you tell me what he's even saying? I'll give you $20 if you can tell me what he's saying. He's like, I don't think I can.
No, I think Kendrick really, he has that lyrical density to him. And a lot of time, like you have to like look up, what does he mean by what he's saying? Right. So I think he's got it. I think J. Cole's got it. I think Drake, when he wants to, has it. And I think Drake's a really interesting example, right? Because he's very like, flexible to the situation. I think that's what's made him so successful. Like he can do that like poppy love song kind of thing, but then he can also do, you know, like No Friends in the Industry and like a more like hard song, and make it, you know, generally appealing to a lot of people. You know, one of the things just kind of on that topic that I think I have shifted my perspective on significantly since like I was in high school. I was very much a music snob in high school, and I was like, this is not real rap. This is, you know, that kind of thing. I think, you know, there's a lot of people who like trash Taylor Swift today, for example. They're like, oh, she can't sing. She just makes pop music. I think it is arguably harder to make music that everyone likes versus make music that only some people like.
For sure.
And that it really, you know, there is a quote unquote formula for pop, and people want to trash pop artists, but you go out and you try and get 10 million people to all like the same thing. Tell me how that goes.
So wasn't my plan to ask, but since you're a hip hop guy, what would be your Mount Rushmore of hip hop? Your top 5? So
bad at ranking.
I know.
Next, you're going to ask me Jordan or LeBron.
Well, it's obviously Jordan. I don't have to
ask. So I would put, Mount Rushmore, you get 4, right? On Mount Rushmore?
I think it's 4, yeah. But I'll give you a top 5 if you want.
In no particular order, Eminem, Biggie, Jay-Z, Black Thought from the Roots.
I'm from Philly, so I concur.
Oh, nice. And I don't really like Kanye's new stuff, but I feel like I would have to put him on there for the impact he's had on hip hop. And even if you just take his first like 4 albums, I think he might even have that spot.
Dana White calls you tomorrow and says, hey, you want to be an announcer for the UFC? Do you drop everything and just go with Dana?
So I think the better call would be Triple H calls me from the WWE and says, we want you to be our WWE announcer. I think the answer, to be honest, I think this is how I would respond. I'd be like, love it. I'm into it. Can we talk? I'm also doing a couple other things, and I want to see if there's any room to keep doing that. And I know that sounds wild, but I really think, and if the answer is no, I might still say, okay, fine. But I'm pretty sure I would try and have the conversation of, can I, in some form or fashion, can I still support entrepreneurs who are trying to do this with my spare time?
Yeah, it's a great answer. And there's always room for everything. You can multitask, especially if you're leaning into your ADD a little bit. I have that. That's a superpower where you can multitask effectively.
Yeah.
Okay. Final question. Please describe what your room looked like growing up.
Okay. Like my bedroom.
Yeah.
Okay. You got bed in the center of the room. You got a desk in the right corner with a computer. The computer monitor by the time I was in high school or middle high school was also, you pressed a button, it could become your TV as well. To the right of that, you've got a bookcase with a bookcase / trophy case. So I've got all my track medals and trophies, hanging ribbons there. I've got posters. Let me think here. I've got a Tupac poster to the left, a random Troy Aikman poster here because it was gifted to me as a kid on my birthday and I just kept it up. Michael Jordan poster here. And then a bunch of like photos from my track career, just like thumbtacked to the wall. Yeah.
Oh. Rajiv, where can people engage with you with any, businesses that you're in? Where can they connect?
Yeah.
Social media, anything else you want to share?
Yeah. So if you ever want to just like connect with me directly, you can send me an email. It's Rajiv@startuphypeman.com, RAJIV@startuphypeman.com. I am at RajNATION, RAJ Nation on most platforms. I say most because the ones I actually use are Instagram, and I'm just starting to get into Threads. If you follow me on X, I may not look at it for like a month. And then on LinkedIn as well, you can type in RajNATION Nathan. You can type in just RajNATION as one word, and I should pop up there too.
Cool. And my audience.
Oh, and on Spotify. Yeah, I should mention that, of course.
Yeah.
Sure. Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, Amazon Music, really any major streaming platform. Look up RajNATION. Again, that's all one word, RajNation. My music should pop up. The music I've got on there is the Goat to Market album. And then earlier this year, I also released a remix of one of the songs on the album as well, or a part 2, I should say, of one of the songs on the album.
Now, my audience, I want to thank you for sticking with us and listening. And I want to thank you for all the wonderful reviews. I'm just so grateful for the 5 stars and the 4 stars and all the comments. Just been fantastic. I'm always looking to improve. Thank you for buying the book, Making Cannabis Personal. Thank you for tuning into this and engage with my content. So I really appreciate that. And Raj, I really want to thank you for being on. It's really enlightening. I love the music conversation. I kind of had all these things I want to talk to you about, but I mean, it's just being in the moment and engaging about things that you're really passionate about. I really appreciate, you going on this journey with me. So thank you so much.
This is a great conversation. You get a lot to think about. And one of the first things I'm going to do is send a text message to some friends and say, I just got asked this question about 5 albums next year. What's yours?
Exactly, man. It's a great question for sure. All right, man. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for watching and listening. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button, share this episode, and hit that bell. Like, comment. I so appreciate that. And check me out on social under Len May or Len May DNA. Find out more on LinkedIn or lenmaycoaching.com. And remember, everything is personal.